Hey everybody, it's April Henry back from my 46th Facebook Live. This is going to be my last week of Facebook Lives, but you can catch all my old ones on aprilhenry.com or on my YouTube channel, which is also called April Henry. Um, I'm going to be ending these on Friday, and this week I'm going to be taking you behind the scenes to get a sneak peek at some of my biggest books. Um, But first, let me put in a plug for an old book that I loved called Still Missing by Beth Gutchian. Um, it was a best-selling novel that turned into a movie called Without a Trace, which I never saw, but it's about a woman whose kid goes missing. And it was written during a time when there were a lot of kids, it seemed like, who were going missing and their faces ending up on milk cartons. So this book grabbed me so hard and wouldn't let me go. And I've been a big fan of hers ever since. In fact, I once wrote her a letter telling her how much I liked her book. I think it was called Domestic Affairs. And she asked if she could share my letter with her publisher. So, but today I'm going to be talking about my own books, and I'm going to start with the very first book that made me write for young adults, Shock Point. Uh, Publishers Weekly says it's a suspenseful tale of betrayal. Booklist says it's the wicked stepmother motif altered to a wicked stepfather. So in this book, Cassie Strang, who's 16 years old, learns that her stepfather, Rick, has been prescribing an experimental drug for teenage patients, and three of his patients have committed suicide. But before she can report him, she is grabbed by two men, handcuffed, locked in the back of a van, and taken to Peaceful Cove, a facility for troubled teens in Mexico. And he tells her mom that he found crystal meth in her backpack, and Cassie ends up trapped in Mexico and must make her way back up to Oregon to reveal the awful truth of what her dad was doing. So it was an ALA Teen Top 10 Award finalist. It was a Texas Tayshia's list, which at that time I'd never even heard of Tayshia's. And I think Tayshia's, which is the Texas award, actually doubled my sales. Um, it was an ALA Quick Pick, and New York Public Library named it one of the books for the teenage. So I can tell you exactly where I got the idea for this book. It was May 9th, 2003, and I read this article in the New York Times that starts like this. Ryan Friedenberg was 14 when he was brought here shackled, kicking and screaming. Two men carrying handcuffs and leg irons came for him at his mother's home in Sacramento, California, shoved him into a van, and bound him hand and foot. They drove him 12 hours south over the Mexican border into a high walled compound here called Casa by the Sea. It was a nightmare, Ryan recalled. I look around and I see kids sleeping on cement floors. I was really, really scared. The big honcho, Mauricio, said, "You don't speak English there." I didn't know how to speak Spanish. Ryan quickly learned the rules: stay silent, be compliant, don't look up, don't look out the window, don't speak unless spoken to. The punishments for breaking the rules included solitary confinement, lying on the floor in a small room, nose to the ground, often for days on end. Ryan was not a criminal. He was only skipping school, his parents said in telephone interviews. But in August 2000, they said, in the middle of a bitter divorce and custody battle, they decided to send him away to Casa by the Sea, which called itself a specialty boarding school for behavior modification. So um, at the time I wrote the book, which I started writing it in 2003, 2004, 2005, you could find lots of people on the internet who had gone to this group of schools. It was like called the World, the acronym was WASP, Worldwide Association of Schools, something or other. And it was started by some used car salesmen. So um, they told everybody that it was cheaper than American boarding schools. It was cheaper because there weren't really any laws for how you could treat children. They had brochures with clip art, photos of kids riding horses on the beach, but those weren't the real kids. The real kids, the most they might ever see the beach is through the barbed wire. They would set up in a small town where they would be the only um, employer, so people would not want to rat them out for how they were treating these kids. And they warned the parents that you should not communicate with your child for the first 6 months or so because they needed to acclimate. And sometimes these kids would actually manage to bribe one of the people working at the school to send a letter home. But the parents, the people who run the schools, were very clever. And they said, you may get a letter from your kid saying that they're being beaten, that they don't have enough to eat, and it is all a lie because they're trying to manipulate you. But in fact, they were telling the truth. So you could, when I wrote the book, you could find a lot of people who are angry about their time in places like Casa by the Sea, and they were trying to find people that had been at school with them, because what would happen is they would tell the parents that your child is going to raise in the ranks and learn how to control themselves. But basically, once the kid turned 18, they just kicked him out. They didn't. There was really no incentive for them to send the kid home because then they wouldn't get any money. They told the parents that your children, that everyone who goes to school here is a B or better student. Well, it's open book tests, and you took it until you got that grade. So I thought, wow, what if a good teen ended up in a place like this? So I was like, well, how can I make it that they would end up like that? And I had been reading some articles about people who fudged on pharmaceutical studies. Like there was a doctor who got a lot of money for each patient that he enrolled, and he had to have urine samples showing that they were clean of different things. And the patients that he saw were not clean of these things. So he paid his nurse to pee into a pitcher, and he kept that pitcher of urine in the fridge. And then every time he needed to submit a sample to the drug company, he would turn in this sample of his nurse's urine to show that these people were clean. So for that, I read stories about the schools. There was tons of them. Um, I read about pharmaceutical studies that people have fudged on. Um, I had a watch at that point that was a Timex that had supposedly it said on there you could use it for navigation, like it had a compass in it. And I wrote to Timex and talked to their customer service person about how to use the watch as a navigation device. I looked at homegrown border patrols. I looked at tasers. I looked before and after video of a flash flood because I wanted that to happen when my character was trying to make her way home back across the Mexican border. And the book was originally going to be called Point and Shoot. I actually have a cover mock-up that says Point and Shoot, but right at the last minute they decided they were worried that schools would think it was about violence in a school, and so they gave me 1 day to come up with a new name. And my agent and her husband and I all brainstormed, and he was like, "What if we have a character say there's a shock point in the book. Like there's a point where a person is got to come to realization, and then it's the shock point." So I was given one paragraph where I could change the wording, and we have one character say the term shock point to another character. Um, so I thought this book was a book for adults. That's all the kinds I'd only written for adults. It was like my 13th book. And my agent read it and she said, no, it's a book for teens. I'm like, no, it's a book for adults. It just happens to have a teenager as a main character. And she was like, trust me, I sell a lot of these things. It's a book for teens. So it was really interesting to me. When it was bought, it was cut substantially from probably 75,000 words down to 50. I felt like my editor did a great job. And also all the swear words got cut out, which helped me learn that I don't really need swear words, that I can just say somebody swore and everybody knows what he said. So the only word that wasn't taken out was the word bitch. And that was in the very first paragraph, which made it quite awkward to read at schools. And then one day it had been out in paperback. I think it was like 2007. And I was in Taylor, Texas, I think. Or no, maybe it was Round Rock. And a kid raised his hand and said, why do you have the B word in there? And then later librarian apologized to me and said he was in a special needs class or something. But I thought, he's right. Why do I have the B word in there? So I asked them to take it out in future printings. At least I think it was Shock Point. It could have been Girl Stolen. Nope, I'm pretty sure it was Shock Point. So tomorrow, though, I am going to be talking about Girl Stolen and its companion novel, Count All Her Bones. Girl Stolen has been my biggest seller to date, although um, the girl I used to be is nipping at its heels. So until then, I will talk to you guys tomorrow about that. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy your Memorial Day. Bye bye.